Welcome back to our course. In this section, we'll learn about locating files by name. Once we're done, you should be able to specify the location of a file or directory by its relative path to the current working directory or absolute location within the file system. You should also be able to determine and change the working directory, as well as list the contents contained within that directory. As we started to explore in the previous section, we need to learn the pathing, or how to specify where a file or directory is located within our operating system. There's two main ways we'll do this. Absolute paths and relative paths give us two different ways to declare the location of a file or subdirectory within the operating system. Depending on our use, we may need to describe them in certain ways, either relative to other locations of files and folders, or absolutely from the root of the file system itself. Understanding both of these is critical, as you'll need each in their own places when you do system administration work. If we consider the first context of absolute paths always describe starting at the root folder or slash all the way down to the proper location of the file that you're discussing. This is a unique path per every file on the file system and allows you to describe the full-length path that one would start with from the slash directory or root location. Alternatively, relative paths will always reference the location of a file or folder from the current working directory. The concept of the current working directory is where you are currently located on the file system. We'll learn commands that allow us to change the working directory we're currently located in, so that then files will change their relative paths from that location. When we need to describe how to get to a file from the current working directory, we'll use relative paths. An absolute path is oftentimes referred to as a fully qualified name, meaning that you can always start from the slash directory or root location and utilize the absolute path to navigate to the file itself. As you try to traverse the file system all the way down to your location, we'll separate each directory and subdirectory using the /. In this way, if we had a file named messages in the location /var/log, we can see that the location that would denote is written out as /var/log/messages. But please be aware that we start with a slash and then move through the various directories down to the final location of the file name, yielding the absolute path. Let's take a look at this within a terminal. From the terminal, if we wanted to get to the var log messages file, we would utilize a change directory command, or cd. When using the absolute path, we always start from the slash directory. Then we iterate through the subdirectories, var, log. Once we are in our proper directory, we then can hit enter. Using the ls command, we can list contents. While many things are here, we can certainly see that our messages file is there. If we wanted to go back to our root directory, we can do so with the cd command and slash. If we wanted to see the contents of this file, we could use the command cat, which we learned previously, using its absolute path of var log messages. In this case, our student user doesn't have access to this particular file, but we can tell that the permissions were checked against a proper absolute path. As I mentioned, the current working directory is a concept of your present location within the file system. As you just saw in the previous demonstration, I was able to utilize a command to move around the file system. Relative paths come into play when you consider this fact that you could have changed directories and be located somewhere else throughout the file system. Wherever your current working directory is, your relative path will be changing as you move that working directory. Relative paths will never start with the slash or the root directory declaration, as they will always start with a reference from the current working directory. An easy way to tell whether you're looking at an absolute or relative path when someone passes this information to you or you receive it from output is to understand if it begins with a slash or not. Absolute paths will always begin with a slash, and relative paths will not. To see an example of the relative paths, let's go back to our terminal. We know that from our last command, we had a file located at var log, messages, and that the cat command would allow us to pass the absolute path there. Using the cd command, I'll navigate into the /var location. Now that we're currently working out of the var location, we can use a print working directory command to see where we're located. Here is where you'll understand a relative path to the file located in its subdirectory and then named messages. We know that the subdirectory in this case is the log subdirectory, and the file we wish to interact with is messages. To perform the same work of the cat command, which we know will give us a permission error, but we'll check for validity of the path, is cat log the subdirectory. Note that we're not starting with a slash, but merely declaring the subdirectory in our current working directory, and then the messages file. That's the difference between the two concepts of absolute path and relative path.